Sorry, hello. So you're all back from lunch. Later on today, we have at 3 o'clock in hardware hacking is the InfoSec career panel. At 5 o'clock, your programs say chill out room, but the demo party will probably be moved to the hardware hacking village since there's, I assume, going to be a lot of you there. At 6 o'clock, if you're doing ham testing, that's in the lockpicking village. And later tonight at 8 o'clock in this room will be the big banquet dinner and party. So, without further ado, we have Amit Serper with Adware is just malware with a legal department.
Thank you very much. Hey everyone, can you hear me okay?
Fuck.
Okay. Yeah, the first F-bomb. Okay, so before I start, I have to say two things. One, this is kind of cool because 2 years ago in LayerOne, I gave the Part A talk about this whole story. Is there anybody here, show of hands, that was in my talk 2 years ago? Rad. 3 people. Awesome. And it was also the first time I gave a talk in a security conference outside of my home country, which is Israel. Another cool thing is I live in Boston now, and yesterday at TSA, I just forgot my laptop there, this laptop. So my wife actually went to the airport, went to TSA, managed to find my laptop, and overnighted it here. So round of applause to my wife, who saved me from such an insane public shaming. Anyways, let's talk about some adware. So the obligatory, who am I? This is me. This is Newton, my cat. My name is Amit. As I said, originally I'm from Israel. I live in Boston now. As of a few weeks ago, I'm the head of security research at Cybereason Nocturnus, which is our new research lab that we're building right now. Before that, I used to act for a nation-state actor agency, whatever. I do a lot of low-level research, malware research, vulnerability research on like shitty IoT stuff because it's always fun. And I shitpost a lot on Twitter, and this is my handle, so you're all invited. And sometimes my shitposting actually causes trouble. So as I said, I am originally from Israel, and about a month ago I went to visit my family, and I used those kiosks that you put your hand on the thing, and it lets you go through the border. The moment I put my hand on the thing, the fucking thing crashed, and I took a picture, and then I noticed that it's running Windows XP. This is a thing that makes people enter a country, and it runs Windows XP. Yay! So I took those 2 pictures, and I posted it on Twitter. About 10 minutes later, I got some really weird phone calls from people from the government telling me, what the fuck did you do? And a day after, that was in the papers. So I should probably shitpost a little bit less or a little bit more. Anyways, a quick history lesson, because this story is literally, for me, the gift that keeps on giving, because this whole thing has been going on pretty much since the LayerOne 2 years ago. So back in 2016, I discovered an adware for Mac, a really aggressive adware for Mac. And when I started looking through it, I actually realized it was a port for OS X for Mac of the Windows Pirate adware. The story was that this guy, I was in an OS X reverse engineering IRC channel, and this guy popped in and he said, my machine is acting really weird, and he started asking questions. I told him, whoa, okay. I told him, hey, send me some files. I'll look at it, we'll see what's going on, and that's how I discovered the whole thing. Throughout my research, I was still living in Israel back then, and throughout my research, I noticed that all of the signing certificates had Israeli names on them. And a lot of things in that, when I looked at the scripts and I looked at the way that the comments were written and the grammar that was used inside the comments, this whole thing felt very Israeli to me. Again, being Israeli, I can figure those things out. About, I want to say, a month after my talk in LayerOne, they actually, whoever did this adware thing, which behaves completely like malware, and we'll see it, they pushed out an update because I created a script that removes the adware from your machine, and they pushed out an update with a new version of their malware that makes my script not to work anymore, pretty much. And when I started researching the new version that they released, I was too lazy to fire up my Mac VM, and I didn't want to extract the files on my own machine. So what I did is I was lazy and I listed the file. There was a tar.gz archive that they were pushing out, and I listed the file inside that archive without extracting it. Now, the tar.gz format, and again, we'll see it, the tar.gz format is a POSIX format, which means that it saves the permission tables inside the archive as they were on the original machine that the archive was created on. And those guys, their username that created the tar.gz archive, their username was their full name, like first name, last name. So a quick LinkedIn search revealed the fact that this was actually the VP R&D of a company called Targeting Edge, and they are in fact in Israel, and they are in fact about, I want to say, a quarter of a mile from the office I was sitting at the time. So that was funny. And there were a bunch of articles. I did this talk in conferences, and basically all of their infrastructure went down. They had lots of servers, and they had a pretty substantial infrastructure, and all of it went down. And they were quiet for a while. Now, every time I find something interesting, a malware that I'm working on, I always have Yara rules for it, be it on VirusTotal or other threat intel services, and our own product, Cybereason, the company I work for. So I always look for stuff. And in November of 2017, all of a sudden, all of my alerts started lighting up like a Christmas tree. So I said, okay, I'll play again. That sounds fun. So as I said, I always have it looks kind of weird. Maybe I should change the resolution. Does this look fine? Like, I don't know if you guys you can see it? Okay, rad. Okay, so as I said, I have Yara rules for pretty much everything I find, just so that I could track it. And once I found some new samples, as I said, I shitpost a lot, so I went to Twitter, and I said, hey, I found this thing, and they're back at it again. It's time for another write-up. The next morning, we started getting threat letters, like legal cease and desist letters from Targeting Edge. And here are some of the best the best things that their attorneys could come up with. So as you can see, this is really personal. In addition, Mr. Serper has been referring to our client's product on social media as malware. Please note that our client product is not malware. Nor does it include any components which may be considered as malware. And blah, 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 blah. It complies with laws and regulations, which is absolutely bullshit because there is no end-user license agreement anywhere. In fact, I doubled dare all of you to open your phones and Google Targeting Edge, EULA, or End-User License Agreement. You're probably going to find links to my talk. They kept saying that as the cybersecurity expert I am, or Cybereason consider itself to be an expert company, it is well known that Adware is explicitly not malware. And a whole bunch of other preposterous things against me, again, very personal, and they said that my previous articles and talks were a direct attack against them, which is actually true because I found their names, and yeah, I mean, I don't know. They also said that their product or their client, which is Targeting Edge, does not spy or takes over the browser. The product does not collect nor store any personal, aggregated, or sensitive information of the user, rather solely technical data, which is used in real time. We are all going to see that this is actually bullshit. They also said that, so part of the thing is, as you'll see as I go through the talk, excuse me, I showed several examples both here in this current talk and 2 years ago on how they're trying to distance themselves from this malware. So you won't find, I mean, if they wouldn't have fucked up and left their names inside the archives, it would have been pretty much impossible, again, back then for me, to tie it back to Targeting Edge, to that company and to those people. Because they use a lot of methods to distance themselves. They use randomly generated like DGA domains, which we will talk about, and they have a whole anonymous infrastructure. All of their domains are registered with privacy guards and all of that, so it's very hard to, unless you know what you're doing and where to look for, it's very hard to tie it back to them. And they said, we're not trying to distance ourselves because the product is not the OSX Pirate malware. It has nothing to do with us. And then they added, they said that I called it malware. Here's how ESET, the AV company, describes what malware is. Their product literally answers each one of those criteria and all of those definitions, which is pretty funny as well. So after I got I think 14 different letters, because for 2 weeks they used to send us between one or two letters each day, and each letter had a completely different narrative. So they started with, we have nothing to do with this, and they ended, their last letter said, this is us, but we're not malicious. So I'm like, okay, wow, you should really up your, you should really get better lawyers. In their last letter, they actually told us, listen, if you want to release your report, because they realized that the report is going to be published, because, and I need to thank the legal department in Cybereason for that, and our CEO, which basically said, oh no, fuck them, we're not afraid from their legal department, we don't give a shit, our legal department is bigger, so fuck them. So they said, if you are going to release a report, hey, if you are going to release a report, include this sort of disclaimer in it. Now, we don't owe them shit, and we don't have to do that, but their disclaimer was so funny and so ridiculous that we ended up including it in the report and in this talk, as you can see anyway, just for the lulz. So it's basically them saying that this is all fine, and Cybereason's mere purpose is to exploit our product's reputation, Google them, there is no reputation, in order to create media buzz and fulfill Cybereason's foreign interest, which I don't even know what it means, but okay. So if they keep saying that everything is kosher, where is the end user license agreement? I literally went through hundreds of different samples, if not dozens, I think it's more than dozens, it's hundreds of samples. No end user license agreement anywhere. And their website has a contact form where you can go to their website and, talk to them and ask them for a quote for their product or whatever. So that contact form doesn't work. So this is a screenshot that was sent to me by Zach Whitaker from ZDNet. He's a journalist. And he sent them an email. Hey there, reaching out for a comment regarding the new report written by Cybereason, blah, blah, blah. The answer was address not found. This is the email on their website, info@targetingedge.com. So I'm like, oh, okay, that's fine. So this was pretty much my reaction to every single letter they sent us, because every day they realized that the noose is pretty much tightening around their neck. And after that quick history lesson, let's talk about the actual stuff. So a quick introduction to Mac Adware. So Mac Adware is kind of the same of what you know from Windows, you get ads and pop-ups and all sorts of shit. But the way that you get infected with Adware is by downloading software not from the vendor's website. So let's say you want to download VLC Media Player. What you should do is go to VLC's website and get it from there. You should not go to download.com or Softonic or all of those third-party downloads websites as if it's 1995. Because what goes on in there is that they give you an installer, and the installer will eventually install VLC Media Player, but it will also give you what I called in LayerOne 2016, I called it, you'll get herpes with that. So, yeah, or chlamydia, or whatever. And the way that it used to work back in 2006 is that they used to create installer packages using Apple's own package installer system. And in Apple's package installer system, there's a feature that's called a pre-flight script. A pre-flight script means it's a script that runs as the installer opens. So actually, even before you saw the end user license agreement, which is in the installer, there's already a script running in the background. And they used this mechanism back then in 2016. That's the mechanism they used to in order to install themselves on your machine. So you would go to a website, think that you're downloading a media player or whatever it is, and you'll double click it, and even before you saw the end user license agreement that allegedly tells you that you're going to install herpes on your machine, it's already too late and you're now infected. So this time around, they kind of shook things up. And what I saw were installers that, what I saw was installers, and they weren't using the pre-flight script. They were just straight up, they wrote their own installer that straight up calls system, like the system C API call, and it would do a bunch of things in the background, and in the end of those things in the background, they would reach out to their server to get all sorts of payloads. Now, if you're familiar with the concept of the Russian Matryoshka doll, which is the doll that opens, and inside of it there's another doll, and you open it up, and there's another doll. So that's pretty much the whole fucking thing that you're going to see here. It's like one payload downloading another payload and another payload and another payload, and every payload has a watchdog that watches over the previous payload to see if it's still running and to keep its autoruns working. So it was a pain in the ass to analyze because it was a lot of shitty code and shitty scripts to read. So anyways, that's the link that I saw when I started looking at samples. Now the thing is that every one of those links has a unique identifier that is right here. And that identifier is only valid for the same installation. Now the thing is that I'm always getting things after the fact. So when I see the link and I try to request that link, it doesn't work because that ID is invalid anymore. So I'm like, I can see that there's new things happening, and I really want to look into it, but I can't because the fucking link won't work. So this is a concept that applies to pretty much everything in my life, which is when everything fails, apply fuckery. So I literally took the link and I trimmed all the crap, and where it says ID, I just put in an HTTP encoded quote, like a single double quote. That was literally my first attempt, and I said, well, I'll send it, what could possibly happen? So I send it, and their server sent me another link. I'm like, interesting. What happens if I request that link? I got a huge installation script. Rad! Now, this link is like full. It's 326 lines, if I remember correctly. It's a really terrible bash script. And it's full of things that are like running as root. It's basically just a bunch of commands, like this command, semicolon, another command, semicolon, another command, and they're like installing crap all over your system. And like right here, you can see launch agents. So they're installing like autoruns and all sorts of hooks and shit on your Mac, so that when you restart your machine, you'll already boot with herpes. Now you can see, where was it? Ah, goddammit. You can see here that they have the ability to run stuff as root because they're calling sudo on a whole bunch of commands, which means that they run as root. Now, here's the kicker. A lot of people, when they saw this talk, they said, oh, wow, they have root? Like, are they using exploits? Like, holy shit. And no, because if you ever installed something on a Mac, you know that the first thing that happens when an installer is opening up, it asks for the password of your user so that it could do all sorts of things. Now, on Mac, by default, your user is in the sudoers list. So your password is also the password that gets you root. So the installer asks for your password. They have your password. They run stuff as root. It's that easy. So as I said, that script was huge, and that's what's being downloaded as the first stage of the infection. Now, yeah, it's 329 lines, not 26. It's a huge bash script. It's very similar and actually almost identical to the script I analyzed and, again, displayed here 2 years ago. So that's one thing that ties this new infection back to them, and they said that they had nothing to do with this. That script also has many URLs in it on different servers, and like the URLs are DGA addresses. Show of hands, do we know what DGA addresses are? Okay, so those who don't know, DGA stands for Domain Generation Algorithm, very popular in malware and nefarious shit. It basically means that there is an algorithm that the people who made this malware have, and they have the ability to basically generate domains. So the malware has the same algorithm, and it just tries to access all sorts of different domains, and the attackers can register those domains whenever they want, because they don't have to have the domains registered. They know which domains the malware is eventually going to hit. So if one of their domains get blacklisted, they can also register the next one on the list, and the malware will attempt to access this domain. So again, like, you don't see DGA outside of malware. Like, there's no legitimate reason to register a really long, weird domain that looks like a SHA-1 hash, for example. Now, those scripts, that giant installation script, just, it does a bunch of work, downloads another script. That script does a bunch of work, downloads another script. And that's what we're going to see here. Now, all of the payloads that are being downloaded are saved to a random directory with a randomly generated name, sorry. And the way that they're generating the domain, the name, we'll see that, is also the same method that they used 2 years ago. So, as I said, it's very generic, it's very easy to understand. As we can see here, they have in their script, they have a function that's called RND. I'm guessing that it stands for random. And it simply cats a file in /usr/share/dict/words, which is just a file with a bunch of dictionary words in it. So it cats that file, gets a random word, cleans it from any other shit it has in there, and just saves it into a variable. And this is how the random name is being chosen. So on every installation of the malware, on every computer this thing is being installed on, the path is not the same. So it's also very hard to figure out if you were infected or not, because if I was infected, there will be a certain word, but if someone else was infected, it would be a different word, and thus the path will change, values and all sorts of other files that it's dropping will change. So it's another way of basically helping them to bury themselves deeper in your machine. And they used that same method, actually the same function with the same syntax in their script from 2 years ago. So that's another thing that ties it back to them. As they said, they don't spy on the users, they don't gather any sensitive information, they don't track the users, but there is a line in their code that simply, and it's just a script, it just gets the unique identifier of the machine, and it sends it back to their server. So you can see that it gets the IO platform UUID, and then it just parses it, and to the point that it has the UUID, and then it just like uses curl to send it to their server, and you can see the domain here, like 09AED5MCK3. It doesn't make any sense, right? There's no legitimate reason to have that domain. And as you can see, there's like a web app of some sort that takes this UUID and puts it into their database, and that's how they know that, oh, this machine with this UUID is infected, and it also sends them this value, my path, is also the randomly generated name that was created for this specific infection. So they actually have a way of knowing which machine, to the point of the unique identifier, has the malware installed with which fake name. So again, they say everything is fine, right? Once the UUID was submitted, then there's another payload that's being downloaded, and it creates a launch agent. Now, a launch agent in Mac speak, if you don't know, it's basically an autorun. So there are all sorts of ways, both documented and undocumented, to create autoruns on Macs. The two most familiar ones are launch agents and launch daemons, which we'll see both of them here. The difference between the two is that a launch agent will launch when the user is logging in. So if you have multiple users on your machine, and like my user has a launch agent, this launch agent will start as soon as my user is logging in. A launch daemon is launching as soon as the system boots. So it's user agnostic. So they are planting both launch agents and launch daemons. And as you can see, again, they're downloading more payloads. You can see like the URLs are weird, and like all sorts of variables are weird, and the purpose of that is to make it very, very, very difficult for detection, because most detection programs and software for Mac just sucks. So it's very easy to avoid them. So I started to look at the payloads that were being downloaded very, very basically. I just looked at the names of the functions there. So like when you look at the functions, at the function names of the binary that was downloaded, you can see like functions that the names are like did receive response, did receive data, will cache response, connection did finish loading, like everything looks fine. And then there was this function that's called run external application. And I was like, run external application? That's kind of weird. So it's IDA time. And when I looked at it in IDA, so here's the function here, run external application. And here's a pseudocode for your enjoyment. Wow, it's like really hard to see. So I'll just tell you what's going on here. So it's calling an Objective-C function that's called NSTask. NSTask is the Objective-C equivalent of C's system. So it simply just executes a command through a shell. And you can see here that one of the parameters actually calls /bin/sh. So they actually have the ability to run stuff as root from that payload that runs on your machine. So they know your computer through the UUID and usernames and whatever it is that they're collecting. And now they have the ability to run code on your machine. I don't know. Yeah, right? This is fine. So as I said, when you look at it, just when you look at this artifact alone, I don't know, it kind of looks like a rat, right? Now, unlike their old payloads from 2 years ago, which were code signed, because in Apple's world, if you want to run something on your machine without getting weird error messages that this is not safe, you have to have your code signed. Now, unlike the Windows world, where you can buy certificates from all sorts of vendors, with Apple, being Apple, you can only buy certificates from Apple. And the process, the procedure to obtain such a code signing certificate is very, very, very complicated. You need to have $99 in your bank account and an excuse, and that's it. So you basically send you fill in this form on Apple's website, you sign up to their development program, and you sign up for that, and you request a certificate, and you tell them, well, I am working on an app for a Mac or for an iPhone that, I don't know, makes fart sounds or something, and I need a developer certificate. Here's $99. Apple will say, thank you very much. Here's your receipt. Here is your code signing certificate, and that's it. Yeah. Okay, we can debate that, but 2 years ago, they had hundreds of certs. And I had a contact in Apple. I told them, hey, this certificate is like bullshit and it's spreading malware. They would revoke the certificate. They would, in like 2 hours, they would have pushed a new version to their server with a new signing certificate. And like that was like a really bad cat and mouse game that I was always losing with. That I was always losing in, sorry. This time, it was code signed, but with something different that's called an ad hoc signature, which is actually completely meaningless on macOS. Ad hoc signatures are used for when you're developing iOS apps and you want to test them on your phone. And your iPhone can only run code-signed binaries. So an ad hoc signature is just as it's called. It's an ad hoc signature. It's a signature that was meant to test your software on your phone. So they would sign their macOS binary with ad hoc signatures, which for me looked really weird, and I thought that it's like some sort of way for them to throw off antiviruses, because, oh, this is signed, so that's fine. But actually, the component that verifies this code signature doesn't exist in the macOS kernel. So, okay. And actually, I gave this talk a few weeks ago in Chicago, and a dude that works for an AV company walked up to me and says, oh, your theory is actually correct. It does throw off antiviruses. So there you go. Another thing that they're doing which is completely kosher, right? Now, this payload also enumerates a list of running processes on your machine. And the reason that it does that, it looks for what browsers are running on your machine. Because you need to remember, the whole purpose of this thing is to spy on you, but it's to spy on you in order to give you ads. And the ads have to be targeted to you. I mean, hey, the name of the company is Targeting Edge. And what it does, it looks at what browsers you have, and then it downloads what's called in the code, it's called add packages. So if you're running Safari, it will download an add package for Safari. If you're running Chrome, it will download something for Chrome. And it also makes sure that everything is up to date. Now, this service that downloads the add packages also creates a launch agent with the same method. So it's generating a random name from the dictionary, and then it creates a listing that runs that launch agent. As you can see here, and on my VM, it was called roadless. So okay, that's a word, I guess. And then when I started looking at it more and more and more and more, I saw that I have more and more payloads to look at. So that was fun. So welcome to my world. So once this thing is done, once it creates that launch agent, this launch agent, it downloads yet another tar.gz archive. And in this tar.gz archive, we can see that we have scripts, we have like text files, and we have some binaries. Along the binaries, and you can see by the way the names, you can see browser enhancer, updater, and protector. And when I saw the name protector, I was like, okay, protector, that's interesting. What is it protectoring? So protector is a binary file, and this is, by the way, you can see in this slide that how much sleep deprived I am. So see if you can spot it. Protector is a binary file with one purpose: to check that all the payloads are running and that all the launch agents and launch daemons are still there. If they are removed, protector will bring them back. Protector also sets up a launch daemon, so there's two purposes. Protector also sets up a launch daemon with a random name, generated in a different way this time. So instead of going to the dictionary word file and like randomizing a word from there, it comes attached with a file called names.db, which has some just words in it, and then it takes like words and it creates those words, and then it creates a random word from them. So another cool thing about Protector, which I found really interesting, is that Protectors and Updaters installation script is also removing a browser plugin that's called OmniKey. And I was like, what is OmniKey? So I went to look at what OmniKey is, and OmniKey is actually a plugin that allows you. Do you know how in Chrome you can go to the address tab and you write something, you just write random thing, hit enter, and it Googles it? Or if you'll type eBay and hit tab and then like search something, it will search it for eBay. So it's basically a plugin that allows you to do the same thing. It allows you to create custom search providers for your browser. And apparently that plugin causes issues with this malware, so it kind of makes it hard for them to see to what website you're going to. So they just straight up remove it without asking you, because this is fine. Now, as you can see, they are like OPSEC masters, and you haven't seen shit yet. And they have lots of debugging shit in their scripts. So like when I guess that when they test their code, they test it in production. So you can see like echo, searching extension, checking, removing. Now, for literally years, for 2 years, I was wondering, like, how do they call that project in-house? Because they don't call it OSX Spirit. That's like an AV name. And yeah, so there's one block in the script that just installs the thing, and it just says installing DaVinci. I was like, cool. I have a cool name for my write-up, the DaVinci Code, because that's not a cliche, right? So let's look at browser enhancer for a sec, which is the binary I told you about. So let's enhance. I fucking love this GIF. Yeah, the first time I saw this, I stared at it for 3 minutes. I'm like, ah, motherfucker! Yeah. So another thing that ties this whole thing back to targeting edge, as they said, because this has nothing to do with us, right? Another thing is their constant use of Qt. So Qt is a programming framework. Some of you may know it. And Qt allows you to write software, and it's basically write once, compile anywhere, or run anywhere, whatever you want to call it. So you write your code, and then you can compile your code to work on Linux, Windows, Mac, whatever. But you know, one of the disadvantages is you get all of the Qt crap bundled into your software. So when you look at it in IDA, you can see like all sorts of Qt types, like the Q string, which is the string type in Qt, if I recall correctly. So that's another thing that ties it back to them, because the binaries I looked at 2 years ago were full of Qt crap. Now, Browser and Answer, which is another Qt application, looks for the browsers that you have running on your machine. It looks for Firefox, it looks for Safari, it looks for Chrome, but it also looks for Microsoft Internet Explorer on a Mac. So 2 years ago when I gave this talk, I showed people like there was a lot of Windows-related crap in this OS X compiled binary. And this was also here in this binary. So as you can see, it's kind of hard. This is a fucking Windows registry key. H key, current user, software, Microsoft, whatever. That's Microsoft Internet Explorer. And it checks for this registry key that obviously shouldn't exist on Mac OS. Now, as I said, I have no idea of what kind of wizardry was pulled in order to make this thing compile at all. But hey, so yeah, that's actually another thing. Now, I gave this talk a few weeks ago, and I said, well, I have no idea why Internet Explorer should run on Mac OS, and then someone from the audience yelled, yeah, but you can use Wine. No, not Wine natively. Like, I know what Wine is. Come on. So, oh, and yeah, and there was ages ago Internet Explorer version for Mac, but I think that died a decade ago. So, like, this is a fuck up. Like, this is not intended. Now, once Browser Enhancer is executed, the browsers will restart themselves. So people would see like, oh, they're like browsing the internet, and all of a sudden, boom, their browsers like all of a sudden restarting. And the reasons that the browser is restarting, because you have a whole bunch of weird shit loaded into your browser. So you have like new tracking cookies that follow you everywhere you go. And you have like a new search page that you never asked for, but you have it because herpes. And they also learn to use AppleScript, which is really funny because 2 years ago, I teased them on Twitter, and with every bit of information I released, I said, oh, well, they could have used this API call. Why didn't they do that? Oh, they could have used AppleScript to do that. And like, every new version, I saw that they actually implemented what I told them to do. Which is kind of cool, and like, I'll show you, you'll be able to see it. It's very important to stay hydrated. So in here, you can see they're starting to use AppleScript. OSAScript is the command line tool. This is like the interpreter for AppleScript. And AppleScript is kind of cool because it's basically English. Like the syntax is like, tell application Firefox to launch, and that will cause Firefox to run. I heard, and I think it's true, that if your Mac is like in French, for example, then you will be able to write AppleScript in French. So if we have any foreign languages, if any foreign language speakers here in the audience, that would be awesome to check, because I only speak Hebrew other than English, and no one cares enough about Hebrew. So good luck. Now this is your hijacked search page. So if you'll use the search function in your browser, it won't go to Google or Bing anymore. It will go to a very reputable search provider called Tika Search. Now, when you go to the about page in tikasearch.com, you can see that their address is in Israel, which is my home country, y'all. And not only it's in Israel, it's Babylon Limited, which is like the biggest fucking spyware crap that ever came out of my country, not including all of the nation state shit. So rad. But just when you think that it's done, there is more. It's a long GIF. Yeah, okay. They also have a post-install script that runs after everything is done installing. So once Browser Enhancer is done with installing itself, it will execute a post-installation script that is called postinstall.sh. Now this script, you guessed it right, it downloads another payload. This time it's not a script because most of the payloads are scripts, and this time it downloads a binary executable called macver. Now, I don't know what MacVer means. Someone suggested the Mac verifier. I don't know. But again, it's generating a list of random words using the same method as you can see here. And it will create a new file called com.application.plist. And it creates it in your home directory /library/preferences. So that directory like tilde library/preferences, you have it in your home directory. And this file actually contains lots of preferences that have lots of preferences for your user. For example, how far are the icons from each other? Where are the icons arranged on your desktop? Like all sorts of shit. So if you go to that directory and you'll see a file that's called com.application.plist, you won't suspect it because it kind of makes sense that a file with that name will be there. But when you look at that file, you can actually see that there's a random word in here. It's another plist with a random word, and it actually contains the name of the plugin that should be loaded into your Safari browser when you're starting it. So again, like it's all sorts of weird, dumb tricks to make it hard for you to find them. You can also see in this image what it means. What I'm showing here is how they take existing configurations and just change them. So they changed. Ah, no. What happened? Okay. So yeah. So they take the file that they just created with that key. The random word here is sailcloth, which is also a word, I guess. And then they change it and they add some more shit to it. So this is another tracking thing. So what they do here is they actually they hijack your Google search page. You can see here. So if you go to Google, it will actually take you to loadingpages.info/jo/is, and it will send the server this GUID, which identifies you, and that's how they can track your Google searches as well. So let's break apart MacVer, this binary. How are we doing with time? Fuck. Okay. Hyperspace mode. MacVer is a 64-bit Mach-O executable. Now, Mach-O is the executable format on OS X. Not PE, that's Windows. Not ELF, that's Linux. Mach-fucking-O. Unlike other executables, it doesn't import any Qt resources, but it has many interesting things in it. Now, I am very, very good at my job. So when I look at the strings, I saw a whole bunch of base 64 crap. Now, as you know, base 64 is the best way of encrypting. And since I am very good at what I do, I decrypted that shit. And when I deobfuscate, so yeah, always like sensitive stuff, always base 64. And when I debase 64 it, I saw a bunch of AppleScript code, which is fucking rad, right? Now, AppleScript is a scripting language that was created by Apple, and it was created in order for Apple to make it easier for their users to automate stuff. So if you have, for example, if you have an application that converts video from one format to another, and you want to convert a whole bunch of files, and your software, your video conversion software doesn't allow getting multiple files and work on them, you can very easily, in plain English, write a script in AppleScript that will tell this application, hey, take this file, convert it, like take this value, put it in this text field, hit this button, and so on and so forth. So they actually used AppleScript, which is what I told them to do on fucking Twitter, and moved their entire malware to use AppleScript. Now, almost any application in OS X has an AppleScript API. So you'd be surprised. You can use AppleScript in almost anything. So AppleScript is actually code injection as a service without doing code injection. And I'll show you that. Oh, yeah, and meme. Yo, dog, I heard you like code injection, so we used AppleScript to inject code that injects JavaScript. Yeah, okay, you need to run. So this is, we need to get on with the show. So this is part of the base 64 encrypted stuff. So as you can see, it's in English, child application, Safari, to set page source, to do JavaScript, and then a whole bunch of JavaScript. And that's the JavaScript that tracks you, displays the ads. You know, you want to go to one site, they will say, fuck you, or will take you to another website, and this is basically the code that does it. The way that they put it inside your browser is through AppleScript. So when you think that you're using Google Chrome or Safari or Firefox or fucking Microsoft Internet Explorer on a Mac, and you think that you're safe because of that, no one can inject code, and everyone cares about security, and this is a Mac, and you can't inject code on Mac because there's not a CPU in there. It's a bunch of unicorns and courage. Apple actually gives you a very easy way of injecting code without really injecting code. So think about it, like every page that you load actually has JavaScript code that wasn't intended on being there, and it doesn't break SSL, you won't get error messages, you don't even know that it happens. Here's another example for Chrome, no one cares. So basically what happens is you have this binary, macver, it runs OSA script through simply calling nstask, or system, right? And it asks the browser, tell me what is the current URL that you're visiting. The browser will say, hey, I'm in, I don't know, Twitter. And it will go back to Macver. Macver will do like this ad bidding war on their servers on Targeting Edge. They'll say, okay, this guy with this UUID, so let's say like, this is Amit. We know that this is Amit. We know that Amit is from Boston. Let's give him ads that are suitable for what he is looking for on Twitter or whatever. And then those ads would actually be planted on the top of the page that you're visiting. So they're actually stealing ad revenue from other websites, which is also illegal. But who gives a fuck? No one. Now, in older versions of OS X Spirit, what they actually did, so if you watch my talk from 2 years ago, they were actually installing a straight-up proxy server on your machine, and they would reconfigure the firewall that's running. It's like it's a PF. It's like the Mac equivalent of IP tables on Linux. So they would actually install this proxy server and reconfigure the firewall to route every packet that goes through port 80 through their fucking proxy server. And this is how they would inject ads. This time, because they listened to me, they're actually using JavaScript to inject code directly to your browser. So they're not installing anything on your machine other than those scripts, right? But since I said that they're masters in OPSEC, they also have debug strings. Like if you run their binary in a console, you'll get all of the debug shit that they didn't remove. So you can actually see, oh yeah, he's going to Google. So I went to Google and I looked for error, right? I simply went to Google and wrote error, hit enter. And then you can see the bidding war, so it goes to a loading page, it sends them, you can see here, my GUID, so they know it's me, and then they say, okay, Google Chrome is running, and then, okay, open this URL, and this URL has an ad. So as you can see here, I looked for error, and then I got another tab, you can see it here, and when I went to that tab, it was an ad for like an antivirus, if you know it's fucking Mac, what was the name? Ah, shit. MacKeeper, yes. MacKeeper, which is like this fake AV, which is also bullshit, so they're probably going to sue me as well. That's going to be fun. And as you can see, after the whole first, last name in the archive, they actually listened to me, and now everything is Batman. Like it's no longer their name, it says Batman. So they thought that by doing that, they can make it hard for me to tie this thing back to them. But oh boy, they were wrong. Because here's the thing, when I write a report, when I write malware reports, if you've ever written anything I wrote, including this report that this talk is based on, it's like 30 pages long. It's like super detailed, and I just dump everything onto the paper, or the PDF, or whatever you want to call it. But I don't reveal everything, because unlike them, I'm not an idiot. Well, I am, but to a certain extent. So I didn't reveal all the stuff I know about them because I want to have a way of finding them again the next time they're doing something stupid. Now they were convinced that because they removed their names from the archive, I won't be able to tie it back to them. But boy, were they wrong, because I already did it. So let's look at the proof that I've shown you now, right? So we have code that looks almost identical to the code that they wrote 2 years ago. All of their methods are the same, other than the AppleScript stuff. And we have frantic letters from their attorneys to us saying, don't publish that. This is like infringing our intellectual property. But while this is all super interesting and funny, and this is like a funny story I can tell on stage, this is not really proof. Then I'm asking you, what is proof? Proof is this thing, for example. So when they're buying their CNC domains, those DGA-looking things, they're always buying them in batches of 8 or 10. And there was this one time they forgot to put on the privacy thing on a certain batch of domains they bought. So when I looked at this domain, I saw that it's related to a bunch of other IP addresses that are tied to other domains, and those domains were registered by the name of the CEO at targetingedge.com. Wait. No, seriously. So we have that. Now, if you go to the Whois record, you can see very clearly the name of the dude and the company and their address. But after my talk in LayerOne 2 years ago, I got a resume in the email, not me, Cybereason, and the recruiter sent me a frantic email. You gotta see this. One of the guys, so I found 2 names there. One of the guy who wasn't the VP R&D was so excited that he sent us his resume, and in his resume, he literally said, my work appeared in Cybereason's lab report, linking it to my report. And there was another article that he linked to that actually wasn't related to me. Now, this is actually even funnier because if you remember, in their letters, they say we don't use any exploits, we don't use any vulnerability, we're a legitimate software company. But the article that he was linking to was on another was about another adware that they did, which was exploiting the back then the exploit was called root pipe, which allows you to get arbitrary root access. So this idiot literally just framed them. He framed them, he framed himself, and he actually made their attorney's claim basically like worthless because here they are using exploits. And with that, dumpster fire, I will thank you. So, do we have time for questions, or do I need to get the fuck off the stage? Someone?
Yeah, questions.
Okay, so I have like, what?
Question.
Yes.
Is targeting edge GDPR compliant?
Funny you should say that. In their letters to us, they said that they are fully GDPR compliant. So yes. But
Did he get the job?
yes, just not at our company. Yeah, so I think I need to get off the stage. If you're really interested in that thing, it's a huge report. It's on Cybereason. What, 1 minute, or do I need to get off? Oh, yeah, okay.
How in the world does it help all you idiots? I know that people that maybe how does it help when they make mistakes? You said a lot of it, but how does it help?
Oh, it's funny. I find it funny because they went after me personally, so I think I can go back in a personal way against them. I mean, I find it funny. And yes, and they're idiots, and they're breaking the law in multiple countries. They're threatening people personally, hi, me, and they're actually not really good at their job. So yeah, in my book, they're idiots. Wow, this is a completely asshole answer. It's like totally not like me, but so, I'm sorry if I'm rude, but like that's what I think. Anyways, if you guys have any questions, feel free to heckle me in person because I have to clear the stage. Thank you, yay!